Good evening, everyone. I'm Ankit, and you're watching the Indian Express analysis, which goes live every day at 4 p.m. on StudyIQ IS English channel. Today is 16th of June, and we are going to discuss important news and articles from the Indian Express newspaper, right? We'll start off our today's discussion with this first article, which is actually on the Char Dham yatra. Why are we discussing Char Dham yatra these days? Because a helicopter crash has happened, which was taking tourists to Kedarnath. That helicopter unfortunately crashed, resulting into death of all the occupants. Now, helicopter crash is something which is happening quite a lot in these days, particularly the helicopters that are taking pilgrims to these Char Dham yatras. So from that perspective, two kinds of information becomes important from our exams perspective. What is Char Dham yatra, where it is happening, the geographical perspective, and the another aspect is the role of Director General of Civil Aviation, which is the sectoral regulator of civil aviation in India. Now, DGCA was also in news because of the air accident or air crash that happened relating to the Air India plane which went down in Ahmedabad. So we are going to understand both of these aspects in detail. Now, this is important from GS paper 1 perspective. We are mainly going to understand the geographical aspects of Char Dham yatra, and this is relevant from GS paper 2 perspective because this is a regulatory body, and regulatory bodies are there in the GS paper 2, right? In the second article, we'll understand the reasons why have PM Modi chosen the country Cyprus for his official visit as he is on his way to G7 summit in Canada. So he has chosen Cyprus. When he is going to Canada, he has halted in Cyprus, and while returning back, he'll halt in Croatia. So why is Cyprus important, and why is Prime Minister Modi chosen it as a destination of his bilateral visit? We are going to understand in our today's discussion quite in detail, right? Now, these kind of article, again, these are important from GS paper 2 perspective because you don't have to see Cyprus as a standalone country in the Mediterranean. You have to see Cyprus in different light, all of which I'm going to tell you in our today's discussion, right? In the third article, we'll understand how is DNA analysis happening, which will help the authorities identify the victims in the aircraft incident that happened in Ahmedabad, right? So we'll understand what are the different procedures undertaken by scientists, undertaken by authorities using the DNA samples to identify the mortal remains of the people who have been died in these crash, right? So this article again is relevant from GS paper 3 perspective, particularly from the subject of science and tech. So we'll understand important steps, important method utilized in this DNA analysis, particularly for identification of people, right? In the fourth article, which is a very important article from economy perspective, we'll understand the need for diversification of crops, particularly shifting from existing paddy culture in the current state of Punjab to another crops, and why is it needed? Everything I will tell you, particularly in our today's discussion. We'll also try to understand the geographical conditions required to grow the most important staple crop in India, that you can say is paddy or rice, and why is it being a challenge, particularly in states of northwest India. And in our today's discussion, we'll focus solely on Punjab, right? So this is the article that we are going to cover, and this is relevant from agriculture point of view. That is the relevant paper here is the GS paper 3. And in the last article, if the time permits, we'll understand in great detail the powers and duties of Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Because last week there was this news and we had missed out on that day's analysis, the roles and responsibility of CAG, particularly with respect to local bodies and autonomous agencies. So in that regard, we'll try to understand in total how does CAG function, what is the roles and responsibility of CAG, particularly in ensuring executive accountability in India, right? So these are the 5 articles that we are going to cover. The last one is important from GS paper 2. As you can understand, CAG is a constitutional body. So all of these articles we are going to cover. Okay, the notes, as you can understand, as usual, they will be available on my Telegram channel, which is called as ATS Live. So you can either go on the top right hand corner of your app, that is the Telegram app, enter the words ATS Live, you'll find the channel, subscribe to it if you still haven't, and if you have some problem in locating the channel, this is the QR code which you can scan, it will take you directly to the channel, right? Now, Bishwajit, Kanchan, Rishi, Bandana, Baga, Yashi, good evening, Dhakkan Babu, Namaste, Jui, good evening, Shushmita, Omkar, Mamta, good evening to you all, okay? So, without any delay, today we are having a very elongated discussion, so let us try to be very prompt, right? So, we'll start off with this first article. Unfortunately, this is something of a tragedy that has happened. as a helicopter, it was flying out to Kedarnath and it has crashed due to bad weather, killing all the 7 occupants of the helicopter. Now, this news article appeared in the very front page of the newspaper. So, we are going to first cover few details about Char Dham Yatra that are relevant from geographical perspective. So, GS paper 1. And then we'll understand the role of sectoral regulator, that is DGCA, which is relevant from GS paper 2 perspective, right? So, these two aspects we are going to understand. Now, the context of our today's discussion is that all 7 people on board, including a 2-year-old child, died after a helicopter carrying them to Char Dham Yatra. It crashed near in Kedarnath, near Gaurikund in Rudraprayag district. Now, the DGCA, which is the sectoral regulator of civil aviation in India, has been directed by the Ministry of Civil Aviation to immediately post officers from the airworthiness, safety and operation sections to actively oversee all the helicopter activity going on in the Kedarnath Valley and rigorously review the functioning of the Uttarakhand Civil Aviation Department Authority Command and Control Room. So, basically, you understand here, the role of DGCA is to monitor all the civil aviation that is going on in India. And also from our exams perspective, Char Dham Yatra becomes very important. So, we are going to understand these two things in our today's discussion. Now, you understand, UPSC will never going to ask you a question that where did the helicopter crash. It will take some things out of those news and ask you that detail. So, that is how we are going to cover what is Char Dham and what is DGCA, because these are important from our exams perspective, right? So, we are not here to understand the news. We are here to simplify the news so that it becomes important from our exams perspective, right? Let me remove this ad here. Okay. So, we were discussing about Char Dham Yatra. Now, Char Dham Yatra happens in the Garhwal Himalayas region of the state of Uttarakhand. Now, basically, Uttarakhand is divided into 2 parts. Kumaon, that is located on the you can say eastern part of the Uttarakhand, whereas on the western part there are Garhwal Himalayas, right? So, this happens in the Garhwal Himalayas region of Uttarakhand. Now, in Char Dham Yatra, the yatra or pilgrimage happens to 4 revered shrines or dhams which are known as Gangotri, Yamunotri, Kedarnath and Badrinath, and collectively these are called as Char Dhams of Uttarakhand. What are Char Dhams of India? Please let me know in the comment section, okay? Now, the pilgrimage to these 4 sites, they are open particularly in the summer and monsoon months of May to November. After November, all these shrines are closed because of the snowfall that happens in this region. Now, the footfall for this pilgrimage last year, 2024, 48 lakh pilgrims took the pilgrimage to these 4 sites, and it constituted 8.4% of annual tourist footfall in the state of Uttarakhand. And in winter months, as you can understand, this region is located at quite a high altitude in Himalaya, so it witnesses heavy snowfall. That is why it leaves these shrines inaccessible for public, and that is why they are closed after the month of November. Understood? Now, recently, the Uttarakhand government has made a proposal that what if we start winter pilgrimage to the sites where these shrines are relocated in the months of winter, right? So, during the winter months, the presiding deities of these temples, that is these 4 locations, Badrinath, Kedarnath, Yamunotri and Gangotri, which are located in the hills of Garhwal Himalayas. You understand, Yamunotri is located here, this part. Sorry, let me change the pen color. Yamunotri is located this part, and this is relocated back to Kharsali in the months of winter. Similarly, Gangotri, the deity is relocated back to Mukba. Kedarnath, the deity is relocated back to Ukhimat, as well as Badrinath, the deity is located back to the Pandukeshwar regions, right? So, Mukba, which is located in Uttarkashi district, this is the winter seat of Gangotri Dham. Kharsali in Uttarkashi is the winter seat of which deity? Of the Yamunotri Dham. Kedarnath's winter abode is the Omkareshwar temple located in Rudraprayag's Ukhimat shrine, and Badrinath, it is relocated at Pandukeshwar in the Chamoli district of Uttarakhand. So, from your exams perspective, the locations of these pilgrimage sites from east, from westwards, that is important. So, please make sure to save this map somewhere in your notes, right? Now, let us come back to the Director General of Civil Aviation, which is the sectoral's regulatory body in the field of civil aviation, and it primarily deals with safety issues. That is why DGCA was also in news during the Air India crash that happened in Ahmedabad. Now, it acts as an attached office of the Ministry of Civil Aviation. So, in terms of operation, this is not an independent authority. For example, the banking sector regulator is what? RBI. But in terms of functioning, RBI is an autonomous institutions moving or working away from Ministry of Finance, but DGCA is working as an attached office of Ministry of Civil Aviation, so it is not as autonomous as compared to say SEBI or RBI, right? Now this DGCA is responsible for regulation of air transport services to, from and within India, and it is also responsible for enforcement of civil air regulations, enforcement of air safety regulations, and enforcement of airworthiness standards. So whenever you take repair of your aircraft, you have to get a certificate from DGCA before you are able to fly those aircraft. So that is why DGCA's role in ensuring civil aviation and its safety in India is important. And any flight, if it is going from India to another country, that is the Air India flight that crashed, it was going from Ahmedabad to London. So that was also under the prerogative of DGCA. Similarly, if any foreign flight is coming to India, that safety is also being regulated by DGCA inside the India's territory, right? And DGCA, it coordinates all regulatory functions even with respect to the global regulator of civil aviation, that is the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO. And this body is headquartered in the capital of India, that is in New Delhi, right? Now, let us understand the functions and responsibilities of DGCA in great detail. Now, this ensures safety of passengers, and not just safety of passengers, but also the safety of crew members in all flight operating inside India, from India, and to India, right? And it conducts regular safety inspections of all airlines and aircraft so that they meet the required safety standards. It investigates any incidences or accidents that occur within Indian airspace and takes appropriate action to prevent similar instances from happening in the future. That is why you may have heard that the Ministry of Civil Aviation has ordered DGCA to conduct investigation of the aircraft crash that happened in Ahmedabad and therefore submit their report within the period of 3 months to the Ministry of Civil Aviation, explaining why this accident happened. And in future, by understanding why this Air India aircraft crash, you can take the measures that can prevent future accidents from happening, right? So this is the role of DGCA. Similarly, it also plays a very important role in growth and development of the India's civil aviation sector. So it works closely with airlines and airport operators to promote industry's growth, improve overall travel experience of the passengers. It plays a crucial role in developing new airports and modernizing existing facilities to ensure that they come to meet the growing demand of aviation industry. You understand, India's civil aviation industry is quite a lot growing. Main airline operators like Air India, like Indigo, they've ordered 500 more aircrafts each. So you understand, going forward, India's civil aviation sector is only expected to grow. So for that, you need a sectoral regulator that not just improves safety, but it also improves the overall passenger experience, so that no passenger is mistreated by the airlines. In case there is a delay, or in this case there is a mishap, the people who are affected by these kind of incidences, they are adequately compensated by the airlines. So this responsibility lies with DGCA. Similarly, it also is responsible for regulation of air traffic in India. So for that, it works closely with the Airport Authority of India to ensure that air traffic in India is managed safely and efficiently. It plays a key role in developing new air traffic control systems and technologies, and it's also responsible for issuing licenses and certificates to pilots, to aircraft maintenance engineers and other aviation personnel, so that they are able to work in this sector, right? So even when it comes to issuing licenses and certificates to pilots, this is also done by DGCA. So please remember that it is responsible for safety, it is responsible for passenger experience, and it is responsible for regulation of air traffic, including certification of pilots and engineers working in this sector, right? So that is why the helicopter that crashed near Kedarnath, the pilot also, that was also under the control of DGCA, because that pilot got his license from DGCA only, right? So all these kind of experiences, or all these kind of incidences, they are taken care of by DGCA. Now let us see how many of you will be able to solve this question. You have to relocate these places from east to west. So from east, you have to locate these places to west. Yashpal sir, yes sir, we are ready. Good. Gagan, good evening. Char Dhams of India, Badrinath, Puri, Rameshwaram, Dwarka. Yes, Gagan, Reshma, you're correct. Sir, can you do Hindu newspaper? Well, Hindu newspaper is covered by Shubham sir. That goes live at 10. And Arushi, our class, that is of Indian Express, it goes live every day at 4 p.m. Okay? Well, let's see which one of these are located from east to west. Okay? Now, eastward you can say Badrinath is eastward. When you move west, you are followed by Kedarnath, then Gangotri, then Yamunotri. So, B, K, G, Y is your right answer when you move from east to west. Right? So, B, K, G and Y. Right? So, this is the right answer. 4, 3, 1, 2 is your right answer. Option C. Reshma, Monica, Jui, Lydia, Bishwajit, Sarang, Yashi, Rishi, Gagan, Saida, all of you are right. Watching your class only, hope sir, that's enough. Yes, that's enough. You have to follow one of the newspapers. It's okay because both of them newspapers are, these two newspapers themselves are very competitive. So if you see one article appearing in Indian Express today, a day or two later that will appear in Hindu. Similarly, it works vice versa also for Indian Express and Hindu. So these two people, they competing themselves to garner the attention of the aspirants. So that is why these two papers are very closely modeled on UPSC pattern also. Okay. Now let us move to the next article. This also appeared in the front page of the Indian Express newspaper, and as you can see, Indian Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi has reached Cyprus. And Cyprus, why is Cyprus news? Because it is Turkey's rival and it is going to be the European Union's chair next year, and that is why Prime Minister Modi has went there to deepen the ties between these two countries, that is India and Cyprus. So let us understand the context of our today's discussion. Prime Minister Narendra Modi landed in Cyprus yesterday on his first leg of 3-nation tour, which will also see his visit to Canada, and then while returning to India, he will halt in Croatia. Now, this is the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Cyprus in nearly 20 years, and this has been seen many as a strategic signal to Turkey. Why is it a strategic signal to Turkey? I will let you know. And it is also because Turkey has steadily deepened its ties with Pakistan. So that is why India is signaling Turkey, see, if you can mollycoddle with our enemy, I can also mollycoddle with your enemy. Okay. So during his visit, Prime Minister Modi will hold talks with the President of Cyprus in the capital of Cyprus, that is Nicosia, and address business leaders in another city of Cyprus, that is the Limassol. Okay. So that is the context of our today's discussion. Now let us understand the first cog of our today's discussion, that is the rivalry between Turkey and Cyprus. Now Cyprus as a nation is an island nation located in the eastern part of Mediterranean Sea, quite close to the countries of Turkey and Syria. So this is the map of Cyprus. You can see Cyprus is located here in the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea, quite close to Turkey, quite close to Syria, and it is also very close to where the action currently is happening, that is the country of Israel. So that is why Prime Minister Modi's aircraft took this route to reach Cyprus so as to avoid the conflict that is going on here between Iran and Israel, right? So what you understand from this is that it is a island nation located in the eastern part of which water body? In the Mediterranean Sea, and it is quite close to the Turkey and Syria. Okay. So let us come back to our today's discussion. In addition to being a Eastern Mediterranean country, Cyprus is also a member of European Union despite being geographically close to Asia rather than European Union. Now this island nation, it got independence from the forever colonialist, that was Britishers, back in 1960, and primarily the society of Cyprus is dominated by two different sections of population, the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots. And while this country got independent, these two sections of population, they participated in a very uneasy power sharing agreement which flared up quite a few years later on, that is 3 years later on, and it led to United Nations peacekeeping force to be deployed so as to counter the violence happening between these two sections of Cyprus population, right? Now what happened after the UN peacekeeping force, that in 1972 the Greek Cypriots, they staged a coup with the help of Greek junta, that is the Greek militia, to emerge as the island, and they became a part of Greece officially. After this coup that happened in Cyprus, Turkey invaded Cyprus, and while the legitimate government in Nicosia was restored with the active intervention of Turkey, Turkish forces since then have not completely left the island. In fact, the northeastern part of Cyprus, it has declared itself as an independent country, calling itself the nation Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, which is only recognized by one country. You don't have to guess, it is only recognized by Turkey. So this part of Cyprus, this northeastern part of Cyprus, according to few people, this is an independent republic known as Turkish Republic of Cyprus, which is only recognized around the world by one country, that is our favorite Turkey. Okay. Now what happened that as per the Ministry of External Affairs India, Cyprus for long has remained one of India's dependable friends. And what are the instances of highlighting Cyprus as one of India's dependable friends? First of all, it has supported India's candidature as a permanent member of the expanded United Nations Security Council. India is forever demanding that from permanent membership of UNSC, which is only consisting of 5 people right now, you have to expand them. And India is claiming that it should be one of the permanent new members of the UNSC, and that candidature or that position of India has been recognized by Cyprus. Similarly, Cyprus has also extended its full support for India-US Civil Nuclear Agreement within the Nuclear Suppliers Group and IAEA, which helped India to address its increasing energy needs and benefit India in terms of economic development. So after India tested its nuclear weapons in Pokhran in 1998, the world made India isolated in terms of participation in the nuclear trade. So India ended this isolation by formally signing a civil nuclear agreement with US, and in that also Cyprus extended its full support to India because it understood India is a peaceful country. It wouldn't use nuclear power to threaten another countries like our neighbor Pakistan, right? So that is why India's atomic isolation ended with the civil nuclear agreement with US, and this was fully supported by Cyprus. So that is why historically the positions that have been sensitive to us, Cyprus have lended its support to. That is why Cyprus is seen as a dependable friend for India. Now Turkey on another hand has earlier supported Pakistan in terms of international resolutions which are passed in many of the UN bodies. Similarly, it has also made some very volatile statements on Kashmir, particularly highlighting Pakistan's stand on Kashmir. And in the recent conflict that underwent after the Operation Sindoor conducted by Indian Armed Forces beyond enemy lines, Pakistan used Turkish-made drones to attack Indian positions in India. And this was seen as Turkey crossing the line by helping our enemy Pakistan. So this is why India wanted to give a certain response to Turkey, that if it can mollycoddle with our own enemy, that is Pakistan, so India can also mollycoddle with Turkish enemy, that is Cyprus, right? So in this regard, Cyprus role becomes very important. And even if you see PM Modi while leaving before his trip, he has made a particular press statement. It said that this tour is also an opportunity to thank partner countries for their steadfast support to India in our fight against cross-border terrorism, and also it aims to galvanize global understanding on tackling terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, right? So this was the statement given by PM Modi. So it highlights that PM Modi recognizes the contribution of Cyprus, albeit it can be a very small country, but even when it has lended its support to India's sensitive concerns, India is going to thank them. Similarly, it is going to increase its cooperation and other avenues of coordination between these two countries so as to grow the relations between these two countries, right? Another factor why India is being increasingly getting involved with Cyprus are two more factors. First, keeping Turkish angle aside, you have to understand Cyprus is valuable to India in many other ways. First is that its geographic location, that is located in eastern part of Mediterranean Sea, and therefore it is also a crucial part of the upcoming India Middle East Europe economic corridor, which is an infrastructure project, and India expects this project to benefit multiple countries, not just India. It will benefit Middle Eastern countries, it will benefit European nations. And IMEC is supposed to boost trade and connectivity between India and Europe via Middle East, and Cyprus in the Mediterranean will have a very important role to play. So this will be the upcoming India Middle East economic corridor. As you can understand, it connects India's western coast to Middle Eastern countries like UAE and Saudi Arabia, and eventually it will help us to reach Mediterranean Mediterranean countries in Europe like Greece, and you understand Cyprus is located here. So you can eventually allow the supplies to be replenished in the country of Cyprus. That is why the role of Cyprus is very important. First, from the perspective of India Middle East Economic Corridor. Another reason why we are increasing our coordination with Cyprus is that Cyprus will hold the presidency of the Council of Europe in the first half of 2026, and India is looking to build a stronger trade ties and security ties with Europe, which we have already covered in a previous discussion. And here Nicosia, that is the capital city of Cyprus, can be a very crucial ally for us. So whenever you are reading the international relations article, you can see the use of countries and its capital go hand in hand. So sometimes we'll say China, sometimes we'll use Beijing, sometimes we'll say Pakistan, and other times we'll use Islamabad. Similarly, for Cyprus also we can use the word Cyprus or Nicosia simultaneously, right? Both of them have one and only the same meaning. Understood? Now, let's see how many of you will be able to solve this question. This question appeared in 2017. Mediterranean Sea is a border of which one of the following countries? These countries are in news because of the conflict between Israel and Iran. Okay. Well, Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau is a part of DGCAR. Humaira Siraj, all of the videos are there in the StudyIQ IS English channel only. So please spend 1 or 2 minutes of your time, you will find all the videos. If you need any help, I will demonstrate it to you also, right? See, Jordan is a landlocked country. Iraq is not bordering the Mediterranean Sea. So Lebanon and Syria, these two countries are bordering Mediterranean Sea. So option C is the right answer. Let's see the map also again, right? Now Syria is bordering Mediterranean Sea, Lebanon is bordering Mediterranean Sea, Jordan Sea, Jordan ends here, it is not bordering any Mediterranean Sea. Similarly, Iraq is also not bordering. Okay, so Syria and Lebanon was the right answer. Jordan and Iraq aren't. Okay, so let us move to the next article. This is from the explained section and it talks about the Air India plane crash and how DNA analysis is used to identify victims, because you understand the people who were traveling in this aircraft and after it crashed, the bodies of the people, they were charred beyond identification. So you can't identify them by seeing their face or physical attributes. So the only thing that can actually confirm their identities is the DNA analysis. So that is why we are going to understand how DNA analysis works in our today's discussion. Now, after Air India plane that was a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, it crashed into Ahmedabad, authorities are now using DNA analysis to identify the remains of the ones who have been killed in this aircraft crash. Now, DNA samples from the victims' family members have already been collected and the few remains have already been identified, including the remains of the ex-CM, Mr. Vijay Rupani. Now, the DNA identification is a gold standard when it comes to identifying human remains, especially after a mass fatality events in which bodies might not be easily be able to be recognized, right? So, the only course or the best course that is available in this regard is to conduct DNA investigation. So, how these DNA active indication or investigation works, I will tell you in our today's discussion, okay? Now, first, the process starts with collecting and storing of samples. As you can understand, as soon as an individual dies, their DNA, it begins to degrade, and over time, the degradation, it makes it difficult, and after a long time, it makes it even impossible for the DNA to be analyzed. So, the first part of this exercise is to quickly collect the DNA samples from the bodies, because after the individual dies, the DNA, it starts to degrade, and the extent of degradation of DNA depends on two factors: what kind of tissues are there, whether it is a soft tissue like flesh or like muscles, or is it a hard tissue like teeth or like bones. Similarly, what are the conditions in which the body is kept? It is kept in humid condition or is it kept in a dry condition? So all of these factors play a very important role in deciding the speed or extent of degradation of DNA, right? So let us understand these two factors in detail. First, the DNA survives much better in a cold and dry condition as compared to a hot and humid condition, and you understand right now in Ahmedabad the condition remains very hot and humid. So the samples needs to be collected as soon as possible, and once collected, these samples needs to be stored in a cool and dry environment as soon as possible. It should ideally be frozen at a minus 20 degrees centigrade, or in cases of soft tissue, they might even be stored in a 95% ethanol. So this is the requirement of storing a DNA sample in a hot and humid environment, because you understand hot and humid environment, it speeds up the degradation process. Another process is the kind of tissue that you might be obtaining from the bodies. DNA from soft tissues like skins, like muscles, they degrade much faster than from hard tissues, which are bones and teeth, right? So this is because the cells in hard tissue, they are largely protected from effects of putrefaction and decomposition. That is why forensic investigations, they usually collect DNA from hard tissues like teeth and bones, right? So these are the two processes that determines how speed or how fast will the DNA degrade. So the actions of investigator is to quickly collect the DNA as possible before the degradation happens. That won't affect the sample, right? Now, after the plane crashes, the collection of tissue samples from the wreckage usually takes a couple of weeks, and if the extent or the magnitude of tragedy is quite big, for example, in 9/11 that happened in US, it took about months, several months for the investigators to collect all the DNA samples. For example, in 2001, the DNA investigators, they took 10 months to collect all the samples from the victims that died due to the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Similarly, to identify the DNA sample, you also need to reference these samples from the biological relatives. So for that, you collect DNA samples from the victim's parents or their children, because you understand these two people, they share about 50% DNAs with the victim. So that is why the primary focus of the authorities is to collect DNA samples from either parents of the victims or from the children of victims. And that is why you need to do it as quickly as possible. But sometimes, depending upon the scale of tragedy, it might take quite a long time, as it took in US in 2001, right? Now, after you collect the DNA, the next part comes is the analysis of the DNA. So for that, you use multiple tests. And what kind of test you use, it depends upon the quality of the DNA sample that you have obtained from the body, right? First here is the short tandem repeat analysis or STR analysis, and this method, it evaluates the nucleus of the cell where the DNA nucleus is available, and it analyzes the short repeating sequences of DNA that is there in the nucleus or in the nuclear DNA of that. So after analyzing 15 or more of these hyper variable regions of DNA, you actually confirm based on the short repeating sequences whether it actually matches or does not match your sample that you have collected, and the resulting profile can be used to ascertain family relationship with quite a high degree of confidence. But the problem with this kind of a sample method is that you need to carry out STR analysis only by using the nuclear DNA. If the nuclear DNA or the sample of the nuclear DNA is damaged, so you won't be able to get a good result out of this test. So for that, collection of nuclear DNA is very essential, which can be quite difficult when it comes to bodies beyond charred. So what you do alternatively, if you are not able to obtain the nucleus or the nuclear DNA, then you go for mitochondrial DNA analysis. And this method, as you can see, is used when the nuclear DNA is degraded or is it not available in certain circumstances. So for that, mitochondrial DNA is found within the cell's energy producing unit, that is mitochondria. You may easily remember what is mitochondria. It is the powerhouse or the power unit of a cell, right? So you obtain mitochondrial DNA from mitochondria, and it is present in multiple copies within the cell. So to recover mitochondrial DNA is much more easier as compared to the recovering DNA from the nucleus of a cell, right? And how do you obtain this DNA, or how do a person inherit this mitochondrial DNA? mitochondrial DNA is inherited from the mother of a person. So it will remain unchanged in all of the children of a particular mother. So to obtain mitochondrial DNA or to match the mitochondrial DNA, you sometimes even depend on the samples that has been taken from the victim's mother or from family members belonging to the mother side of the relatives, right? So for that, you can use maternal grandmother's DNA to sample the victim's DNA. You can use maternal aunts, uncles, distant relatives, as long as they belong to the maternal line of inheritance. So these persons only can provide you or enable the match of victims' mitochondrial DNA. Understood the difference between mitochondrial DNA and the STR analysis? Any doubt? In STR analysis, we take the sample from the nucleus of the cell, whereas in mitochondrial analysis, we take the sample from the mitochondria of the cell. Mitochondria is different. Mitochondria is inherited from the mother. That is why to match these samples, you need to match them with the mother side of the relatives. Okay. Now the third sample is called as Y chromosome analysis. Why Y chromosome? Because you understand humans are made up of two types of chromosomes, that are X and Y. So a biological male will consist of chromosomes X and Y, whereas a biological female will consist of what is known as X and X chromosome, right? So in this method, a panel of STR that we have understood first, here we understand Y chromosomes which may have been passed to a particular victim from their father, and it is examined to match the remains of victim with the male relatives, right? And this can be useful only when close relatives are not available. So in case close relatives are not available, we take samples from the paternal line, that is from our father's family. Why? Because Y chromosomes are only given to the males. So Y chromosomes in a human being needs to be obtained only from the paternal side of the family, right? So your paternal male cousins, paternal uncles, brothers, they might be the ones who will be providing the samples in case you have to understand or you have to analyze the DNA using Y chromosomes analysis. So this is the third method of DNA analysis. Now let us understand the last method of DNA analysis, that is single nucleotide polymorphism SNP analysis. Now this is typically used when DNA sample taken from the victim is highly degraded. And what is SNP? SNP variation is basically the DNA sequence which you get from analyzing the nucleotide bases in your DNA profile, that is adenine, guanine, cytosine and thymine, and when they are differed along a specific application, you can understand these sequences vary differently in different people. So my DNA sequences, or in a way my DNA has the nucleotide bases, they will be quite different from yours. So we can identify the sequence of DNA and whether it belongs to X person or Y person. And as SNPs are unique to each person, they can be used for identification purposes with help of reference samples that are taken from victims' personal belongings. So we use in that case toothbrushes, we use in that case hairbrushes, and we match the DNA profile or the way the nucleotide bases are arranged from the sample taken from victims' belongings to the victim sample. And if they come positive, you can safely say that the victim has been identified. Now this method, although is quite easy because you can take personal belongings as the victim, but it is not as effective as the STR analysis method, right? So in terms of effectiveness, STR analysis is the most effective, whereas the SNP method is the least effective of them all, right? So these are the four methods that we use to identify the DNA sample from the victims, from their relatives or from their personal belongings. Any doubts you can ask me, otherwise you can solve a question. This is very similar to the question that appeared in 2023 on an aspect of DNA. So I have changed that question to suit our today's discussion. Mitochondrial analysis of DNA is primarily used for what? Yes, option C is the right answer, because here we match the sample with the maternal lineage references. So we can take samples from the mother, mother's sister, mother's father or mother, or any of the mother's side relatives, right? So option C is your right answer. Now next question. SNP analysis is used for which of the following cases? Well, option A is incorrect because it does not trace maternal ancestry, right? Yes, it helps you match degraded DNA samples with personal items of identification like toothbrush, like hairbrush, or like comb, right? So option B is your right answer. Now DNA, or how it works or how it differs, what are the essential differences between DNA and RNA, we cover them in great detail in our Pratigya batches. Now earlier we were telling you to take admissions in the evening batch, right? But now the evening batch is closed. The admissions of those batches closed yesterday on 15th. So from today onwards we are taking admission in the morning batches. And the admission of this batch will start from 23rd of June. To take admissions to these batches at this rate, what you need to do is to apply the code ATS Live. How to apply the code? What are the benefits of this batch? Let me tell you. Now to take admissions to these batch, you need to go to our website. This is the website. First, you will be needing to log in by simply entering your mobile number. Once you're done logging in, select this all language option. I understand many of you who's watching the video might not be coming from Hindi speaking states, right? So Hindi might not be of primary language, or even it might be a primary language, you might not be that comfortable in taking the classes in Hindi, right? So for that, we are offering courses which are exclusively in English batches. Now there are two options for you. Whether if you want to appear for next year's examination, that is 2026, I'll suggest you opt for Pratigya batches. But if you plan to take the exam or attempt the exam in 2027 or later on, you can opt for long-term batches. Now the features of both these batches are same. The only difference is the duration of these batches, right? There is a difference in duration, so please ensure. So if you want to appear for next year's examination, this is the batch that you need to opt for. If you want to take admissions in this batch, click buy now. Once you click on buy now, see the course fees right here. It says 37,999, but I'll tell you a way where you can get admissions to these batches after a discounted rate, even discounts on this item, right? Click on buy now. I'll tell you how to get the discount. Click on add promo code. Once you add promo code, on your left there is an option to write the code. Here enter the word ATS Live, which is flashing on the bottom half of your screen, right? Once you're done writing ATS Live, click apply, and as soon as you click apply, see the discount of 7,000 rupees is now applied, and the diamond batch is at 30,999, platinum is at 27,500, and gold is at 19,999. You can obviously take admissions in either of these three batches. The decision is rests up to you. But if you take my opinion, I'll say opt for diamond batch. And why am I saying opt for diamond batch? Because many benefits like mains residential program, like prelims residential program, getting a selection box, which is books relevant from exams perspective, guidance from faculties, that is Margdarshan, or a full refund of your course fees if you clear prelims under the scholarship, all of them are exclusively available only in diamond batches. So all these benefits you can get it by going for diamond batches. But before taking admission, please do not forget to write the code. Why? Because it saves 7,000 of your rupees, right? So let's understand that. Now get back to our discussion. If you have any doubts based on what are the features available in diamond, platinum or gold batches, this is the slide that you need to take a look. This slide will be available in the notes, which I will upload after the session end, so you can take a look at it, right? Now let us move to the next article. This is also from explain section, and it says why Punjab is struggling to diversify from paddy farming. So in this regard, paddy is a very important crop of India. So we'll understand what is paddy, and we'll also understand what are the reasons why is Punjab growing paddy despite not having the ideal geographical conditions to grow such kind of a crop, right? So in this regards, let us understand the context. Now, despite Punjab government's efforts to diversify the state's crop mix, the state of Punjab is once again staring at a near record area under the cultivation of paddy. Last year, Punjab saw an all-time high of 32.44 lakh hectares of land under paddy cultivation, which was about 92% of the total land under cultivation in Punjab, and roughly the same amount, that is 35 to 36 lakh hectares, are still under cultivation in Punjab in this particular Kharif season, which began from June onwards, right? Now, current trends, it suggests that the acreage of rice this year will remain in the same ballpark as in the last year. So it says that last year was the near record areas where the paddy cultivation was there in Punjab. So in this regard, what becomes important is the background. Now you need to understand main crops in the Kharif season, which begins from June and rests up till October. crops that are grown in Kharif season include paddy, that is both of basmati and non-basmati types, cotton, maize, certain pulses like moong, urad and arhar, as well as oil seeds like groundnut and sesame. As well as sugarcane is also grown in this season, but the difference between these crops and sugarcane is that sugarcane takes a year long to cultivate, right? Now, what you need to understand that paddy, in terms of all these Kharif season crops, they account for 92% of total crops laid down in the Kharif season, whereas rest all the crops except paddy, they are seen as alternatives to paddy, right? So, the prevalence or the dominance of paddy is so much that it accounts for 92% of entire Kharif crops in India, even in Punjab, right? Now, let us understand few more details about paddy. Paddy, India is world's second largest producer of paddy after China, and in terms of exporter, India is world's largest exporter of rice. Giving it the tag, India is a net exporter of water. Why is India a net exporter of water? Because water is used intensively in growing of paddy. That is why when you export paddy, it automatically means indirectly you're exporting water from your country to other countries, right? Now, rice is grown in India primarily in 3 seasons. The major ones are obviously it is a Kharif crop. It requires wet and warm climates which are ideal for rice growing, but it is also grown in well irrigated areas during the Rabi season, particularly in southern states. In summer seasons, it can be grown in deltaic region of West Bengal as well as Krishna Godavari Delta in the state of Telangana and Andhra, where water is available throughout the year. So essentially what you get from these requirement, that warm climate and water is essential for growing of paddy. So in this regard, let us understand important geographical conditions required to grow paddy. First, you require adequate supply of water because more than 90% of 90 centimeters of annual rainfall is required so that the paddy is grown good, whereas the better conditions will be where the annual rainfall is between 200 to 250 centimeters. Now, to transplant paddy into your fields, you require the prevalence of a flooded condition where water needs to be in a state of gentle movement, not stagnant water. Otherwise, if the water is stagnant, it will lead to low soil aeration and nitrate formation is also impeded. Similarly, in terms of temperature, you need high light intensity, which is abundant sunshine essential for at least 4 months of growth, and the temperature range needs to be between 20 to 27 degrees centigrade, whereas 15 degrees centigrade is adequate for germination of seeds also. One of the very few crops that is paddy, it can even sustain excess heat as long as water is supplied sufficiently to it, right? So as you can understand, the most important condition is the abundance of water, be it from rainfall or be it from irrigation, right? So before proceeding into Punjab, let us understand few more geographic conditions essential for growing paddy. First is the soil. It can be grown in wide ranges of soil, but the ideal soil that provides for good growth of paddy is heavy clayey to loamy soil that has moisture retention capability so that water does not percolate effectively, and the soil needs to be acidic, that is having the pH between 4 to 6.5. Similarly, you need a lot of labor traditionally, particularly because this is a labor intensive work and the whole family needs to be involved, but in many areas we have seen now mechanization is taking over. Similarly, you need all these 3 kind of major nutrients, that is nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, whereas minor nutrients like iron, manganese and boron is also required in calcareous and the sandy salts, which are very beneficial for paddy cultivation. So now let us understand why or what are the challenges with paddy. As you can understand, water needs to be there for paddy cultivation. So obviously the biggest challenge is the availability of water. So the problem is growing a same crop year and year on a same land, that is the culture of monocropping. It increases the vulnerability of those crops to pest and diseases, and paddy cultivation specifically, it depletes soil nutrients, which increases the farmer's dependence on chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and also it consumes water like no other crop. That is why I told you India is a net exporter of water. Why? Because it exports rice in large quantities. Similarly, Punjab's situation is very different as against the states located in eastern and southern part of the country. The northwestern part of the country like western UP, Punjab and Haryana, they do not witness as large amount of rainfall as it is needed to sustain a paddy cultivation. So for Punjab, the water for paddy is provided through groundwater irrigation. That is why Punjab's groundwater table has been declining rapidly, as much as 0.5 meters on an average a year and largely this can be attributed to cultivation of paddy. So this is the challenges that you face while growing paddy, particularly in an area of northwestern country which is not suitable for growing water intensive crops, right? So government of Punjab recognizes this problem, and that is why it has made many attempts to encourage farmers so that they grow some other crops and not paddy. Punjab, through various schemes and policies, has long tried to address this issue. This year, the state has launched a pilot project to divert 12,000 hectares of land from paddy to maize. Maize is what? Maize is corn. And it also wants to increase the areas under cotton cultivation by 15%. But even if you see these measures are implemented, this will only mean that the prevalence of rice in Punjab, it only gets reduced by 1%. Earlier it was 92%. Then after implementation of this will lead to just 1% drop in cultivation, right? Another problem is that previous attempts made by Punjab government has not yielded expected result. One of the most famous instance of promoting farmers to diversify away from paddy was enactment of Punjab Preservation of Subsoil Water Act. Now this act was passed in 2009. And it barred any nursery sowing and transplanting of rice before May 15th and June 15th respectively. Now, before cultivating or sowing the rice in a land, you need to transplant or you need to germinate these seeds in a nursery. And after that, only when you get the smaller plants, then only you transplant these seeds into the ground level. So this is what is called as transplanting, and another one is nursery. So according to this act, you can't plant these seeds in nursery before 15th of May, and you can't transplant these saplings into the ground level before June 15th. And this ended up pushing the cropping cycle 1 month back, because it shortens the window that the farmers have before cultivation of kharif crops and reaping of rabi crops. And that is why the farmers, as soon as they reap they cultivate the kharif crop, they have a very short amount of time, so they are forced to burn the paddy stubble, which you can understand leads to pollution in the entire northwest region, most famously in Delhi, right? So this is the problem that Punjab is facing. Punjab government has brought in many schemes, but it has not paid rich dividends, so that farmers are encouraged to move away to another crops. Now, why paddy remains the king of Punjab? First, that there are many plans to divert 12,000 hectares of land away from paddy to maize, but it is not ambitious enough to make any real difference. First, because farmers are guaranteed that their paddy produce will be procured under the MSP regime, and it makes paddy a more attractive proposition for farmers than alternatives like maize and pulses, which enjoy much weaker public procurement support. Similarly, current situation is that product of decades, that is flawed policy making even from government side. Government is providing freebies like free electricity to farmers that the farmers use to power their irrigation pumps and draw water out of their groundwaters. And also government is providing huge subsidy on fertilizers like urea, which also promotes farmers to use these kind of inputs to grow paddy and not another crop. So this is why would any farmer would want to move away from paddy when they are getting such huge benefits from government, right? So these policy measures from the government are also a culprit why Punjab is facing such crisis. Now, in an economy which is susceptible to instability, particularly agriculture sector, farmers in India, they remain very risk averse. They would want to grow only those crops where procurement is assured by the government, and it also has strong institutional support in terms of subsidies and freebies, right? So despite many measures by government of Punjab, these are not enough for the farmers to shift away from paddy, right? So the next question is what you need to do. First, what you need to do is to promote diversification, so that these diversification methods should not be just for namesake. They should be aggressive measures that should provide farmers with strong market support, that is reliable buyers, efficient supply chain and market linkages. For example, Maharashtra state, pomegranate and grape growers, they succeeded because the state has strong market linkages, which ensures both domestic and export related procurement for farmers. Similarly, Karnataka is providing horticulture cooperatives which help farmers to aggregate and sell vegetables directly to urban consumers. So first, you need a very strong market support like reliable buyers, both domestic as well as foreign buyers, and then only the farmers will try to grow these crops, right? Another issue is that you need to provide public procurement support even for alternatives. For example, chana and mustard, they have MSPs, but these are not actively procured by government agencies. So for example, in Madhya Pradesh, what happened that government of Madhya Pradesh guaranteed the growers of pulses as well as mustard that their produce will be procured under price support scheme, and that is why farmers shifted away from the paddy. So similar methods can also be applied in Punjab also. Alternatively, government can also make a shift in farm level economics and infrastructure. First, government can develop irrigation system like drip irrigation system or sprinkler irrigation system, which utilizes lot less amount of water as compared to the groundwater irrigation. Also, you need to develop processing units in nearby areas for alternatives also. Why? Because rice processing units obviously would want the farmers in the nearby region to grow rice, but if there is a processing unit for oil seeds, processing units for cotton, farmers will grow those kind of crops, right? Also, farmers needs to be given economic incentives like crop insurance scheme should also be provided for alternative crops. If God forbid the conditions are not good and their crops go bad, they can get certain kind of recovery money from the insurance. Also, credit schemes needs to be focused on non-rice crops, and input subsidies, that is biofertilizers in case of pulses, can also be provided as against chemical fertilizers. Okay, so this is what you need to do in case to shift away from paddy and to other crops. Now it is 4:58. This is the practice question that you can opt for. You can write this question. I have curated this question based on our today's discussion. I have provided you sufficient material that you can use to solve your answer. And the next article, this is also a big discussion, so we'll cover this article tomorrow. You can download the notes on the Telegram channel ATS Live, and we'll see each other again tomorrow at sharp at 4 p.m. Okay. So this is all from my side. Please have a very good day. Okay.